Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we are enthusiastically breaking down the shifting loyalties, deep lore, and ancient magical prophecies hidden in the source material for this incredibly dense and thrilling narrative. There is just so much happening beneath the surface here, so let's jump right in and map it all out.
Here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the power of dragon dreams, then the dark magic at Harrenhal, the burden of queenship, riders and rebel dragons, and finally, the betrayals at Tumbleton.
Starting off with Section 1, the power of dragon dreams and decoding Helena's prophecies.
Now notice how Helaena connects directly to her ancestors. Aegon the Conqueror was a dreamer who foresaw a terrible darkness coming from the north, which actually led to his famous Song of Ice and Fire prophecy. Helaena is tapping into that exact same magical dragon dream state. The source material notes she actively seeks this out, wearing a moon blue dress, which is a color deeply tied to higher magical phenomena, all to find some kind of peace with a timeline she knows she is entirely powerless to change.
Just think about how heavy that burden is when you break down these three key visions. First, she sees a white horse and buggy moving toward a bright orange light, which symbolizes a journey to her own death. Second, there's a lunar eclipse, turning the world completely cold, directly foreshadowing the White Walkers and a literal long night. And finally, a deeply personal, heartbreaking vision of giving birth to her son Maelor, only for him to be immediately taken away by a stone-faced knight. It's this dark, completely unchangeable future playing out right before her eyes.
It's really interesting to see how the television writers are noticeably deviating from the books regarding the tragic fate of both Helaena and her dragon Dreamfire. In the original lore, Helaena commits suicide out of unimaginable grief from Maelor, and Dreamfire is actually crushed by the dragon pit's dome. The show, however, points toward Dreamfire being killed directly by a storming mob. It's a massive shift in how these events unfold, and it absolutely raises the stakes for how the screen adaptation is interpreting destiny.
Moving on to Section 2, Dark Magic at Harrenhal and the Psychological War.
The absolutely crucial point to grasp here is Alicent's terrifying situation. She is literally trapped at Harrenhal by an intensely paranoid Aemond and the mysterious Alice Rivers. Desperate to escape, Alicent chops poisonous berries, planning to disguise them as the spiced wine she used to give Aemon as a child. But before she can even act, Aemond reveals his utmost trust in her by confessing a horrific secret. He actually tried to kill his own brother, King Aegon. So Alicent has to maintain this maternal charade and embrace her son despite this harrowing admission of treason, before she finally poisons him and flees for her life.
And this paranoia is further highlighted by the fate of Sir Adrian Redford. In the show's timeline, Aemond ruthlessly kills Redford at Harrenhal using the infamous cat's paw dagger, just because he simply cannot trust strangers. But in the books, Redford actually dies on Dragonstone valiantly defending the queen. It's a really stark contrast that exposes the true depths of Aemond's psychological unraveling. It isolates him even further from reality.
All right, Section 3, the burden of queenship and Rhaenyra's human struggle.
Meanwhile, back on Dragonstone, Rhaenyra is employing some highly calculated political tactics in her private chambers. By purposefully keeping her trusted lady-in-waiting and spy, Ellen de Massey, in the room to act as a silent witness, Rhaenyra is actively asserting her dominance. And this isn't an accident. It adds a palpable emotional weight while Rhaenyra deals with Mysaria's continuous attempts to poison her opinion against Daemon.
You can feel the pressure mounting, which highlights a fascinating contrast between Rhaenyra and her late father. Helaena theorizes that dragons fundamentally alter their riders because they are a profane magic created in darkness. Remember, Viserys rode the massive Balerion only once, actively renouncing the strength of dragons to embrace a peaceful reign. Rhaenyra, on the other hand, is increasingly leaning into this profane magic, risking a serious descent into violence and cruelty as she violently lashes out in her frustration.
All this mounting pressure leads to a remarkably vulnerable moment where Rhaenyra outright asks Mysaria, "Do you think I'm worthy?" It reveals just how desperately she needs validation right now. With her carefully constructed world crumbling around her and literally no one telling her she is doing a good job, she needs to know that trying to follow in her father's even-handed footsteps isn't a massive mistake.
So we have to ask ourselves this critical narrative question before we transition from the psychological war to the physical battlefields. As Rhaenyra realizes her father's peaceful methods haven't brought her loyalty or victory, will this extreme pressure forge her into Rhaenyra the Cruel? That brings us to Section 4, Riders and Rebel Dragons, and the shifting aerial power. If we look at the status of our dragons right now, it is just pure chaos. Rhaena, whose character has actually been merged with Nettles from the books, is dealing with Sheepstealer, who has fled horrifically injured. Then we have Daemon and Caraxes, who barely escaped a massive, messy dragon brawl involving Seasmoke and Syrax. But look closely at the status of King Aegon II and Sunfire. They are both scarred and melted, yet they are still fiercely in the fight.
Meanwhile, Aegon's story takes a massive turn here. It's honestly incredibly engaging to see him finally step up like a true king. Cornered near Maidenpool, he flat out refuses Larys and Tyland's advice to flee, declaring he's going to make his stand and die as a king. Just then, in the show's narrative, his fiercely loyal dragon Sunfire appears right behind him to melt Lord Mooten's men. This is a thrilling twist on the book narrative, where Mooten's men were the ones actively hunting or recovering Sunfire. Aegon's refusal to run shows this tragic but very genuine heroism.
And finally, Section 5, Betrayals at Tumbleton and the Ground War Climax.
Ormond Hightower is under immense, literally suffocating, physical pressure right now. I mean, just 2 days ago, 20,000 rivermen crossed the Blackwater Rush. Present day, Sir Criston Cole's head has literally just arrived, mounted on a spear. And in just 1 to 2 days, an absolute slaughter will arrive at the very gates of Tumbleton. Tick-tock, right? Yet Ormond remains surprisingly calm, telling Gwaine that he holds a very dark trick up his sleeve. That trick involves weaponizing the shifting loyalties all around him. Corlys Velaryon, acting as a true man of honor, refuses Ormond's poisoned wine, but it actually costs him a finger as payment, a grim gift that could send back to his son, Alan. Meanwhile, Prince Daeron is so overwhelmingly frustrated he's considering surrendering his crown entirely. But the real masterstroke here is Ulf the White. Ormond masterfully manipulates Ulf by totally ignoring the lesser castle of Honeyholt and instead offering him the incredibly prestigious seat of Driftmark. Ulf officially betrays Rhaenyra for this massive prize, proving once and for all that psychological manipulation is just as deadly as dragonfire.
Ulf seals his dark betrayal with these absolutely chilling final words. The people will burn. It perfectly sets the stage for the catastrophic devastation we are about to witness. The pieces are all on the board, and the fuse has absolutely been lit. Which leaves us with one final provocative thought to ponder. With betrayals in the ranks, dragons horrifically injured, and ancient unavoidable prophecies fulfilling themselves in real time, who will actually survive the impending Battle of Tumbleton? Thank you so much for joining this explainer. I really hope this helped clarify the incredible depth of this lore, and I absolutely cannot wait to see how these forces of war collide next.